Once again, with B folded hands, I welcome all of you to this second clinical summit of Advanced Gastro Summit 2020. It is jointly organized by Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad and Noble Gastro Hospital Ahmedabad. I would like to thank Gujarat State Chapter of ASI, Gujarat State Surgeon Association, Association of Physicians of Gujarat, Association of Ahmedabad Surgeons, and Gujarat State Family Physician Forum for contributing us, their presidents and secretaries for contributing academically by joining this meeting. Today we have Dr. Pramod Garg. Dr. Ashwin Garvi sir will introduce him. Before that, I would like to introduce Dr. Hardik Parmar, who is a gastroenterologist at Noble Gastro Hospital, and he will be moderating this session. I would also like to mention that those who are attending more than 10 sessions, they will get a course completion certificate, and those who are attending all sessions, 22 sessions, will get a special academic gift from the Association of Ahmedabad Physicians. So I would like to request Dr. Hardik Parmar to begin this session of second clinical summit. Hardik, are you there? So today, I welcome both the chairpersons, Dr. Ashwin Garvi and Dr. Pankaj Modi sir. Dr. Ashwin Garvi is senior physician in Ahmedabad and also president of Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad. And Dr. Pankaj Modi is senior surgeon as well as professor in general surgery in Civil Hospital, Ahmedabad. I would like to request Dr. Ashwin Garvi to introduce Dr. Pramod Garg sir and then begin our second clinic of summit. Sir, you are mute, sir. Dr. Ashwin, you are mute.
Now audible?
Yes. Sir.
Audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
I, Dr. Ashwin Gadvi, President of Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad, welcome you all on behalf of APA and Noble Gastro Hospital. I welcome Speaker Dr. Pramod Garg, Chairperson Dr. Pankaj Modi, Organizer Yogesh Harwani, and Dr. Hardik Parmar, and all the participants who are joining with us for today's second clinic of Advanced Gastro Summit. It's my great fortune that I am introducing Dr. Pramod Garg, a stalwart in the field of gastroenterology. He is the president of AIIMS Raebareli. He is the professor of gastroenterology and former associate dean at AIIMS New Delhi. He has published more than 140 articles in national and international journals and is invited as speaker in national and international meetings. He is editor of International Journal of Pancreatology. He is in editorial board of internal journals like Nature, Clinical Gastro and Hepatology, Gastrointestinal Endoscopy, Journal of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. Today, he will discuss the topic of chronic pancreatitis, how much we can do medically and endoscopically. Friends, all of you know that chronic pancreatitis is a condition where the pancreas is structurally and functionally deteriorating, and gradually the exocrine and endocrine functions of the pancreas worsens. In such circumstances, we are helpless to treat the patient. But with endoscopy and medical management, a significant palliative therapy can be offered to the patients. I welcome Dr. Pankaj Modi and Dr. Hardik Parmar. And before Dr. Pramod Garg may start his talk, if you have anything to add, please, and then we will have talk from Dr. Pramod Garg.
Hardik has joined. There was some technical issue, Hardik. So I have introduced Dr. Ashwin sir and Pankaj Modi sir. So you can moderate the session now.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Pankaj, would you like to add anything?
Sir, you are mute. Dr. Modi sir, you are mute.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me this part. I would like to say this is a very interesting subject for all surgeons. We do lot of surgery in chronic pancreatitis, but the part which is problematic is end result. With lot of experience of 25 years doing all kind of surgery, longitudinal pancreatic jejunostomy and Fraise procedure, the pain relief is the main problem in chronic pancreatitis, apart from obviously exocrine and endocrine dysfunction. So I would like that Dr. Garg will highlight the particularly pain generator and the pain part, which is a really a headache for a surgeon even before and after surgery. I welcome Dr. Garg. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank Dr. Yogesh Harwani and Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad and both the chairpersons for their kind introduction. It's my pleasure to give this talk on chronic pancreatitis. Since the time allotted to me is about 45 minutes, I will go through some of the basics of chronic pancreatitis. What is this disease, how it develops, what are its causes, and finally come to management. So as Dr. Modi has pointed out, it's a disease which is sometimes chronic and disabling and leads to significant pain and often decreases quality of life of patients. Now, that is why it is important for us to understand the disease in a holistic manner rather than only to discuss the endoscopic therapy of that, which is but a small part of the overall management strategy in these patients. So, what is chronic pancreatitis? How does it develop? Why does it develop? And how do we manage it? These are the four major areas of my discussion today in my talk. Now, chronic pancreatitis is often considered a very complex disease with uncertain pathophysiology. To paraphrase Winston Churchill, who said something about this, about Russian actions after World War II, chronic pancreatitis is a riddle, its pathophysiology is an enigma, and the mechanism of pain remains a mystery even to this day. But perhaps there is a key, and this is what we are going to discuss in the next 45 minutes or so. So if you look at this picture, this is a normal looking pancreas on a CT scan. And this is a CT scan of a patient who has established chronic pancreatitis. You see the pancreas parenchyma is atrophied. These are multiple calcifications, and also the MPD is dilated. So if you see this picture, it's a case of established chronic pancreatitis. The question is, how does it develop from a normal pancreas to this stage? Now, before I do that, what's the problem? What's the magnitude of the problem of chronic pancreatitis in India and the world? If you look at this map, it shows you the prevalence of chronic pancreatitis varying from 10 to 77 per 100,000 population around the world. Now, it has the highest prevalence of about 100 per 100,000 population. That means 0.1%, 1 in 1,000 person in India is likely to have chronic pancreatitis. With increasing diagnostic capabilities, the prevalence seems to be increasing in many parts of the world. So before I go to the clinical features and management, let me briefly give you a historical perspective. Now, this is very important because most people in India believe that we see a different kind of pancreatitis, chronic pancreatitis, which was initially termed as tropical pancreatitis. Now, it is important for all the physicians, surgeons, and people managing such patients is to understand what the disease is. So if you look at the phenotype of the disease, many times you will be shown this kind of pictures. If you attend any talk on chronic pancreatitis, whether it is endoscopic therapy or it is surgical therapy, you will see a picture of ERCP with a markedly dilated duct. And you may often see a picture like this, multiple stones in the pancreas duct. And people believe this is chronic pancreatitis. This is definitely chronic pancreatitis, but this is an end stage of the disease. This is not the disease that most patients will come to you. And I think we need to understand the development of the disease for its better management. So in 1970s, early 70s, a very large series was published from Kerala of over 1,000 patients. And what it described is that these are patients who are very young, they are malnourished, 90% have diabetes, and they have very large pancreatic stones, the picture that I've just shown you. Now, Dr. G. Varghese was the one who described this. And this is a patient who had chronic pancreatitis, malnourished. This is courtesy Dr. Ramesh from Kerala who provided me this picture. These patients used to consume cassava, tapioca, large stones, dilated duct. They required insulin for control of diabetes, and they died very early. So Dr. G. Varghese, my tributes to him, because he did seminal work on chronic pancreatitis in India. And he said, this is a disease which causes pain in childhood, diabetes in adolescence, and death in the prime of life. And then he termed this as tropical pancreatitis for want of a better name, because this disease is seen in tropical country like India, so it is tropical pancreatitis. Now, the question is, do we really see this kind of picture anymore, or because the name still carries on? So we studied patients of more than 400 patients at AIIMS. We found 38% of our patients had alcohol-related pancreatitis. Only about 59% had idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. Now, recently there is a series from Jaipur, from Rajasthan, where about 50% patients have alcohol-related pancreatitis. And I'm sure in many other states, this problem is increasing. I'm not so sure about Gujarat, but certainly in other parts of the country, this is a major problem. The second point is, what's the age of onset? So I showed you that initially it was considered to be early childhood, but now we find that the mean age of onset is about 25 years. So patients who will come to you will be in their late teens or in their 20s. That is the typical presentation of these patients. And similar results have come from other parts of the country. Now, in a study, we found that 75% of patients were normally nourished or overweight, and only 25% were malnourished. But most patients had lost weight after the onset of the disease. So weight loss in these patients is seen, but it is due to the disease rather than a cause of the disease. So we believe that it is not malnutrition which is causing the disease. It is an effect of the disease. Then obviously cassava is now no more considered as an etiology. AIIMS study, Kerala study, animal studies have all ruled out cassava as a cause of chronic pancreatitis in any part of the world. Then most people thought it's a severe disease, large calculi, the picture that I've shown you. But many patients we find, they do not have large stones. They don't have a markedly dilated duct. They present early in the course of the disease. So it depends on the stage of the disease or how the morphology looks like. Then earlier belief was 90% have diabetes, but our series showed 35% having diabetes. Chandigarh showed 23%. Kerala showed about 60%. So it's variable. So overall, about a third of patients may develop diabetes when they are in their 30s. So it is also a function of age. So a disease is there for about 5 to 10 years before the patient will develop diabetes. So that is another presentation of these patients. Now, very important study came from Kerala, where they showed that in the 1980s and 2000s, there was a marked difference in the patient's presentation. Mean age earlier was 20, it went up to 30. BMI was very low, it went up to 20. Most patients earlier were poor, now they belong to middle class. And diabetes was much less than before. So most people thought that this is the kind of pancreatitis that we see in India, known as tropical pancreatitis, special type of CP, young age, cassava consuming people, severe disease, large stones, malnourished, almost all diabetic, and early death. But what the data from different centers over last 20 years have shown is that most of these patients have idiopathic chronic pancreatitis, about a third have alcoholic pancreatitis. We see both young and old patients. They don't consume cassava. They are both early disease and advanced disease is seen. Most patients are not malnourished. And when I say malnourished, means BMI of less than 18. About a third will have diabetes, and overall prognosis is reasonably good in these patients, as I will show you a little later on. So far what I've shown you that the phenotype of chronic pancreatitis in India has changed, or what the perception earlier was has changed now. The question is, what's the cause for this change? Why has there been a change in age of onset, nutritional status, diabetes, and prognosis? And the answer is rapid economic development. And I'll show you some data on that. So this is the data from Kerala, where in 1970s, the state GDP was a mere $320 million. Now, over 30 years, it increased to $13 billion. Mean income, per capita income was $15, increased to $525 after 30 years. 40-fold increase in the income of people and the state. So when we compared the age of onset, the BMI, and the prognosis, we found initially age of onset was in their teens, it went up to 30s. The BMI was low, it went up over a period of time. The state GDP increased subsequently, and the prognosis of these patients improved remarkably. So there is a parallel increase in all these parameters with increasing income. But another problem occurred with the rapid economic development. That was about alcohol consumption. And national average alcohol consumption is 4 liters, but in Kerala it was 8.3 liters, and urbanization increased. So this is a picture I showed you earlier of a malnourished patient with chronic pancreatitis. And this is a picture one of my fellows provided me from Kerala. You see here the kind of economic development, the nutritional status. And if you see a picture on the wall, will tell you that she belongs to a different socioeconomic status. And this is how the overall phenotype of the disease has changed. But the problem which has occurred is, I showed you this picture, that if you look at alcoholic CP, it was 2% earlier, and it has gone up now to 33% in Kerala. So remarkable change in the overall disease phenotype and causes. So if you look at chronic pancreatitis development, we have 2 factors. One is genetics, and the other is environmental factors. And both have strong interaction in causing the disease. So why this happens? Why this pancreas becomes like a chronic pancreatitis? So I've shown you the clinical picture, which has changed over time. Now let's see why chronic pancreatitis develops. So somebody develops acute pancreatitis, and you know the common causes are alcohol, gallstones, and sometimes idiopathic. About a quarter of these patients are prone to develop what we call as recurrent acute pancreatitis. So they have one episode of pancreatitis, they recover, and some of them will develop recurrent acute pancreatitis. Then about 50% of them may develop chronic pancreatitis over a period of time. If you follow them longitudinally, you'll find that. So in a study of 75 patients with recurrent acute pancreatitis, we found about half of them develop chronic pancreatitis during follow-up over a period of about 5 years. So how the disease develops, how the disease progresses. So these are the parenchymal changes. So pancreas has 2 major components. One is parenchyma, the other is the ductal system, pancreatic duct, which will take the pancreatic juice from the parenchyma and it flows into the duodenum. So both these things will have changes during the development of chronic pancreatitis. So this is a normal looking pancreatic parenchyma on an endoscopic ultrasound, like an abdominal ultrasound. Now, when a patient develops recurrent episodes of pancreatitis, you see the changes in the parenchyma. It looks different. There are hypoechoic strands and foci and lobularity. It means there is something happening in this pancreas. And that something is fibrosis, okay? And later on, when you have further course of the disease, further deterioration, the patient will develop now calcification and the atrophy of the pancreas. If you look at the ductal changes, so initially you find this is a ERCP picture. This is the bile duct, this is the pancreatic duct. The pancreatic duct looks normal here, not dilated, no irregularity. But what happens subsequently when a patient has recurrent pain, they develop mildly dilated duct. very subtle changes and irregularity. And further on, they develop a dilated duct with stone appearing here, the calcification that I showed you. So there are two components. One is a parenchymal change, the other is a ductal change. And it's a slow progressive disease. It develops over about 5 to 10 years, and the course is variable in different patients. So why am I showing you this? I will come to this later when I come to the management of these patients. It is very important to understand the development of the disease. Don't think the disease is one where there is only dilated duct and stones. So this is the progressive model of the disease: acute to recurrent acute pancreatitis, and finally chronic pancreatitis, right? So pathophysiologically, what happens is that there is cellular injury. There is injury to the pancreas, to the parenchyma, whatever is the reason. It could be alcohol, it could be something else. And this leads to inflammation. So patient will present with pancreatitis, inflammation, acute pain. And once you have recurrent or chronic inflammation, it leads to fibrosis. So this is how the disease progresses. So you have recurrent injury, recurrent inflammation, and fibrosis leading to chronic pancreatitis with fibrosis. So this is the first stage when you have mild early chronic pancreatitis or recurrent acute pancreatitis, subtle changes in the duct, subtle changes in the parenchyma. Then the patient progresses, ducts dilated, stones, calculi appear, pancreas gets atrophied a little bit, and finally you have a disease where you have markedly dilated duct, multiple large stones, and totally atrophic pancreas. This is an end stage of the disease. Now, so why does it happen? So I'm not going to the details of the pathophysiology. That's not my mandate. My mandate is to discuss about management. But briefly, I'll tell you why does it develop. So how, where, and what initiates injury? So there are two components I told you in the pancreas. One is parenchyma, which is composed of acinar cells, and the other is ductal system, which gets involved later, not initially. Initially, it is the acinar cells or the parenchyma which gets involved. Now, this also has relevance when we talk about management. So environmental factors, toxins like alcohol, smoking will act on the pancreatic parenchyma. And now we know there are many mutations. Most commonly is SPINK1 gene mutation. Then there are other mutations like CFTR, which causes cystic fibrosis, PRSS1, cathepsin B, and others. All these mutations and environmental toxic factors will affect the pancreatic parenchyma, mainly the acinar cells. Once they cause injury to the acinar cell, there may be other problems like oxidative stress. And once this cycle of recurrent injury inflammation carries on, then patient develops fibrosis. So many studies from our center, other centers have shown increased oxidative stress in these patients. So this is how over a period of time, the disease would develop. So now I come to some of the basics about clinical presentation and diagnosis. Now it will be easier for people to understand how the disease presents and how do we diagnose, because I've shown you how gradually the disease develops with regard to its basic components of parenchyma and ductal changes. So I've shown you that patients develop recurrent acute and then chronic pancreatitis. So at this stage of chronic pancreatitis, they present with recurrent episodes of pain. So here also they present with recurrent episodes of pain, but here also they present with recurrent episodes of pain. Some of the patients with chronic pancreatitis may present with chronic abdominal pain. Some people call it type B pain, but it's a chronic abdominal pain. And they may present later with complications of, say, diabetes, steatorrhea, or local complications. So for example, they may develop biliary obstruction presenting with jaundice. They may have portal hypertension, may present with bleeding. And some of these patients may develop as a late complication pancreatic cancer. So I will not go into details of these complications, but suffice it to say that it depends on the stage of the disease on how the patient will present. So 90% of patients will present with abdominal pain, either recurrent episodes, or some of them may present with chronic abdominal pain, where the pain is persistent for months together. Now, the cause of recurrent episodes of pain is recurrent inflammation, which I showed you earlier. Cause of chronic abdominal pain is generally development of complications. For example, a pseudocyst might develop. For example, an inflammatory head mass may develop. For example, in some patients, pancreatic cancer may develop. So anybody who comes with chronic pain, you have to look for a complication. And complications are inflammatory head mass, pseudocyst of the pancreas, or sometimes pancreatic cancer. So how do we make a diagnosis? It is not difficult to make a diagnosis of chronic pancreatitis. Your diagnostic criteria are clinical. Clinical is patient presents with abdominal pain, either recurrent or chronic. And he has some imaging features. And there are only two imaging features that you should look at. One is pancreatic calcification, and the other is pancreatic ductal dilatation and irregularity. Now, don't get confused between calcification and stones. They are one and the same thing. So when the calcification or the stones are in the smaller pancreatic ducts, which is seen on CT scan, people will refer to as pancreatic calcification. But they are in effect very small stones in the side branches of the main pancreatic duct. When you have calcification in the main pancreatic duct, people call them stones or calculi. So it is calcification and calculi or stones is one and same thing. It only depends on the size and the distribution. So you need two imaging criteria for that. One of the two or both of them. So it is not difficult. The problem comes in when a patient comes with recurrent episodes of pain and you don't have these criteria. That's an early stage of the disease, recurrent acute pancreatitis, right? Calcification, so what modalities, diagnostic modalities do we use? Calcification is best diagnosed on a CT scan. In fact, if you do a plain CT scan, not a contrast enhanced CT scan, that is the best test to diagnose pancreatic calcification. Okay, so patient comes in with recurrent episodes of pain, you think there is chronic pancreatitis, do a plain CT of the scan and you find there is calcification. Diagnosis is made. You don't need anything else. Mind you, amylase or lipase do not help most of the times because in chronic pancreatitis, amylase and lipase are normal. So don't do it. Only when a patient presents with acute exacerbation of pain, you may find the amylase or lipase are increased. Otherwise, they are not. And in a late stage of the disease, even with acute pain, they may not be raised. Okay, so in acute pancreatitis, amylase lipase help you, but not in chronic pancreatitis. And to look at the ductal abnormality, the best test is MRI with MRCP. So you only need two tests. But if you do CT, you find calcification, there's no need for you to do MRI for making the diagnosis. We may need it for a different purpose, but we don't need it for making the diagnosis. And of course, we have to test for diabetes in every patient. This is very important. For very early changes where there is no calcification or dilated duct, we may have to do EUS, and I'll show you some pictures of that. The problem with EUS is, and gastroenterologists are very, very enamored by this technique, and they're very happy doing this and referring this patient. Sometimes overdiagnosis of chronic pancreatitis is made because of EUS. So one has to be very careful in diagnosing chronic pancreatitis on EUS, okay? We gastroenterologists will claim that it's the best test and we'll do this and that, but be careful about that. So this is a patient with early chronic pancreatitis where there are significant the parenchymal changes. And I showed you this picture, mildly dilated duct, which can be seen on ERCP or MRC, but we don't do diagnostic ERCPs anymore. And on EUS, sometimes you see mildly dilated duct here, pancreatic duct. Now, that was an early CP. Now, this is a patient with established chronic pancreatitis. On ERCP, you see dilated duct. On MRCP, you see dilated duct, and you see a filling defect here, which is a stone. Okay, so you can see that on MRCP. And on ultrasound, you can find this calcification. In fact, abdominal ultrasound shows it very well. And on CT, you see this calcification. This is established chronic pancreatitis. And this is a patient with end-stage disease. So you see multiple large stones. I showed you this earlier. MRCP, you find markedly dilated pancreatic duct. And on CT, you find multiple large calculi and atrophic pancreas. This is the end stage of the disease. Again, this has bearing on treatment. That's why I'm showing you this. So now we come to management. So I have taken about 25 minutes, and I think I will take another 15 to 20 minutes. So Dr. Harwani, do you want me to stop here and take some questions, give a break of 2-3 minutes, or you want me to proceed?
Sir, I think we can complete the session, and then at the end we can go ahead.
But are there some questions at this stage which might be relevant to the pathophysiology or clinical presentation or something like that?
Sir, no, sir, questions are based on surgery. There is one question that in era of EUS, what is the place of pancreatic function test in diagnosis? Can we say they are obsolete?
So, right. So I think it's an important question. So first of all, pancreatic function test can be direct or indirect. Generally, in clinical practice, there is no role of pancreatic function test. But to diagnose maldigestion or steatorrhea, sometimes we need to do fecal fat or fecal elastase, which are indirect tests for pancreatic function. In most laboratories, fecal elastase or fecal fat is not done. But nowadays, some labs are offering fecal elastase. But in a patient who is asymptomatic, in the sense he doesn't have steatorrhea or diarrhea, there is no need to do that. So generally, no. We may do it for research purposes or for some studies, but in general, it is not required to make a diagnosis.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So then I will proceed with the management, the second part of my talk. So we need to manage diabetes and steatorrhea, and I'll briefly touch upon them a little later. But today I'm going to discuss mainly about pain, as Dr. Modi and Dr. Harwani and others said. So again, coming back to this picture, early stage, these patients have recurrent abdominal pain. And the site of injury I showed you earlier is acinar cell, the parenchyma, not the duct. Okay. Then we go to next stage. Here you see the duct is dilated. These patients, and they have stones. So these patients also have pain. Now the problem lies both in the duct as well as in the parenchyma. So here there may be a role for something else other than medical treatment. And here most of the patient at end stage, they do not have pain. It is called burnt out disease. Some of these patients may have what is called as neurogenic or neuropathic pain, but that's a minority. And I would suggest that don't worry about that. If you have such a patient, it is best to refer the patient to a specialist. Okay. So from here we go, what's the mechanism of pain? So people discuss about pancreatic inflammation, which is obviously a cause in those with recurrent inflammation. Ductal hypertension may be there. There is a stricture or a stone in the pancreatic duct, and some patients may have neurogenic pain. So the first therapy which you have to give is medical therapy in these patients. In the medical therapy, most important is analgesic. Obviously, patient comes with pain, you have to give analgesic. NSAIDs are often given for acute inflammation, but opioid analgesics are also required for recurrent and chronic pain. Some of these patients are also given enzymes, pancreatic enzyme, and antioxidants. And if medical therapy doesn't work, we go to endoscopic therapy or surgery, but again in particular situations. And I will briefly touch upon that. So this is a patient, early stage of the disease. He presents to you with recurrent abdominal pain. You do MRCP, it shows subtle changes in the duct. It is not markedly dilated. There are no stones. What do you do? The mechanism of pain here is inflammation. And I showed you these patients may have oxidative stress. So these patients are treated with medical treatment. They are not candidates for endoscopic therapy or surgery. So when you hear a talk in a conference and people show you large stones being taken out, dilated duct, everybody thinks this is what chronic pancreatitis is. No. Majority of patients in the beginning of the illness for at least 3 to 5 years do not have dilated duct or stones. Okay. So medical therapy is required. Now, one thing I want to emphasize here is that for those of you who are physicians and surgeons and you manage patients with chronic pancreatitis, they will often come to you with acute exacerbation. They have acute abdominal pain, you know, once in 3 months, once in 2 months, once in 6 months, many times in a year, or sometimes infrequently. What do you do? So first of all, you don't need to refer this patient to a tertiary care hospital. You can easily manage this yourself. The management of such patients is very easy. nil by mouth, IV fluids, and analgesics. We can try NSAIDs like diclofenac. We give tramadol or any other opioid, make them pain-free. Now, majority of patients will get better in 3 to 5 days. Only occasionally, the pain will last for a week or 10 days. Majority will be fine in 3 to 5 days. Once they are okay, you start them oral feeds gradually, and they'll be okay. There is no role of antibiotics. So first thing most doctors will do, patient comes chronic pancreatitis pain, they will give imipenem. Because they must have heard somewhere, imipenem is a good drug for pancreatitis. Please don't give antibiotics. They don't need it. Number 2, please don't do repeated CT scans. So my advice to all of you who are listening and who are managing these patients is, management of acute exacerbation of pain is very easy. Don't give antibiotics, don't do repeated CT scans. This is important, okay? So early stage medical therapy, now come this stage. Patient presents with recurrent pain, some may have chronic pain. And here some of these patients, because of these stones seen here, dilated duct, may have ductal hypertension. Now this may be because of stones or stricture. Now for these patients, we again give medical therapy, but these are also candidates for endoscopic therapy or surgery if they do not respond to medical therapy, okay? Now end stage disease. Fortunately, 90% patients will not have any pain. It's a burnt out disease. We don't need to do anything for pain. But some of these patients, 10% may have neurogenic pain. Again, for these patients, endoscopic therapy and surgery doesn't work. They may require treatment for neuropathic pain. For example, you must have heard about pregabalin or amitriptyline. Some of these drugs may help in these patients. But surgery or endoscopic therapy does not. In fact, endoscopic therapy should not be tried if you have large multiple stones all over the pancreas. So in the medical therapy, a word about antioxidants. I've told you we give analgesics, we give enzymes, antioxidants. Why? Because these patients have oxidative stress as one of the mechanisms of inflammation. So in a randomized trial, we gave a cocktail of antioxidants and we showed that it works very well. The number of painful days decreased significantly, and patients, about a third of patients actually became pain-free when they were given antioxidants. So based on this study, we generally prescribe antioxidants to all our patients. So how do you prescribe an optimal medical treatment to these patients? One is diet. So give 1500 to 2000 calorie diet, homemade diet. One advice is give small, frequent meals. So we generally advise 5 meals a day. So they should avoid fasting, that's number 1. And they should not take heavy meals because there is a significant meal pain relationship. So a person who is fasting for say 8-10 hours and then suddenly takes a large meal, it is possible that it may exacerbate the pain. And this often happens in children and young adults. They will take something in the morning or not take anything in the morning. They go out to school or college or somewhere and 8-10 hours, they haven't eaten anything, come back home in the evening and they will have a feast. And there's a problem. So small, frequent meals, homemade diet, no definite restriction, no restriction for fat. A normal homemade diet with normal fat is allowed in these patients. In fact, if you restrict fat, they may develop malnutrition. So this is part 1 of medical therapy. Stop smoking and alcohol. They may require to go to a psychiatrist if they're not able to quit it themselves. Most important treatment in patients with alcoholic chronic pancreatitis. Third is we give pancreatic enzymes. Now, pancreatic enzymes have not been shown to have a definite role in alleviating pain, in managing pain. However, some patients do respond to enzymes, even for their pain. And also, most of our patients have subclinical pancreatic exocrine insufficiency. So we give them enzymes routinely in the hope it might improve their pain and also it might improve their exocrine insufficiency. And then we give them antioxidants. Now, one of the problems with the antioxidant is that people will give one tablet of this antioxidant twice a day. That will not help these patients. So there is an adequate amount of antioxidant that you need to give. So this is the combination that we use: 0.5 gram vitamin C, beta carotene, vitamin E, organic selenium, and methionine. And we give about 6 tablets. I mean, there are now, earlier there was only one brand available. Now we have a couple of brands available in the country. So depending on the brand, you can give either 1 tablet 3 times a day or 2 tablets 3 times a day. To give adequate doses and give at least for 3 to 6 months. Then only you will find effect. If you give 1 tablet twice a day for a month, nothing is going to happen. This is not a disease where there is an acute beneficial effect of the treatment. And then you must give adequate analgesia, but avoid morphine. Morphine has been shown to exacerbate the disease in chronic pancreatitis. So don't give morphine. And there is often a problem. These patients may become addicted, especially patients with alcoholic chronic pancreatitis. So this is an optimal medical treatment prescription for patients with chronic pancreatitis. And I've shown you, if they come to you with acute exacerbation, manage them easily, nil by mouth, IV fluids, analgesics. That's it. Now from here onwards, if you find a patient is not responding, or patient has dilated duct or has stones, then we go to the next stage. Some of these patients we give, if they have neurogenic pain, pregabalin for about a month or 2 months. For endoscopic therapy, the prerequisites are dilated duct, ductal obstruction, significant pain, not responding to medical therapy. But if they have large burden of stones or burnt out disease, it's a contraindication. Don't do it. Don't send the patient for that. So what we do, if we relieve the obstruction by taking out these stones or putting in a stent in these patients, then it helps. If there are stones, large stones, we first do extracorporeal shockwave lithotripsy, ESWL, and then do ERCP. Or sometimes we do ERCP first, we find stone is large, then we send them for ESWL. It's a combination of ESWL and ERCP is done to take out these stones and put in a stent if there is a stricture. So sometimes you have a patient like this where this is an ERCP being done. We are doing sphincterotomy of the major papilla. And once you do sphincterotomy of the pancreatic sphincter, you see these stones may come out. They're not very large stones. So if the sphincterotomy is adequate, these stones may come out. And once these stones come out, we generally place a small 7 French stent in them. Occasionally, these patients have a large stone. So depending on the size of the papilla, we may do a good sphincterotomy. And sometimes we also dilate this with a balloon, but only infrequently. And sometimes you see a very large stone can also be taken out. You see, it's a very long stone which has been taken out. But majority of time, this is not the case. That is why I don't want to emphasize that this is a treatment for chronic pancreatitis. That is why I showed you about the stages of the disease and the corresponding treatment for that. If patient has significant disease, not responding to any medical therapy or endoscopic therapy, or those who have complications like inflammatory head mass, a biliary obstruction, or pancreatic cancer, then surgical therapy is offered to these patients. So no response to medical or endoscopic therapy, dilated duct, then they do a lateral pancreaticojejunostomy. And about 80% of patients will have pain relief. If they have a pancreatic head mass, which is often an inflammatory head mass, now the treatment is Baker or Fraise procedure, where they take out part of the pancreatic head and do a lateral pancreaticojejunostomy. So there was a randomized trial about surgery and endoscopic therapy, which showed surgery to be better than endoscopic therapy. But most of the time, patients prefer endoscopic therapy first before they go for surgery. So what happens with this kind of therapy that I've shown you? Medical therapy, endoscopic therapy, surgical therapy. What's the response? Right? So we published this data a few years ago, where we found that majority of patients actually have very good response. So 288 patients, 52 responded to medical therapy. About 67 patients required endoscopic therapy, and another 16%. So 52 plus 16% responded to this, and 26 patients require surgery, about 10% of these patients, and another 6.7%. That means total of 84% patients had significant improvement in their pain with medical therapy, endoscopic therapy, or surgical therapy in some of these patients. No response was seen only in about 15%. So it's not a disease where you don't get relief. You get good relief if you follow them properly and offer them proper therapy. And with increasing duration of the disease, this is at 1 year, this is at 15 years, majority of patients become pain-free. This is a proportion of patients becoming pain-free. So at 15 years follow-up, about 80% become pain-free. Now that's an important thing. So a patient comes to you, he's only about 20 years old, parents are worried, what will happen in future? Tell them, nothing is going to work, nothing to worry. In about 5 to 10 years, the pain will go away. Patient may develop diabetes, but today we have very good treatment for diabetes. So don't worry about that. So you have to tell them it's not a lifelong disease, okay? So another important thing is management of diabetes. Once they develop, you have to impress upon them that now don't worry about pain, worry about diabetes. Because uncontrolled diabetes will cause more problem than recurrent pain. And by the way, most patients do not require insulin. They may manage with diet and oral hypoglycemic agents. Only about a third to 40% of patients will require insulin. If they have steatoria, then we give pancreatic enzymes. And a couple of words about enzyme therapy, give at least 10 to 20,000 units of lipase with each meal. And it should be given with meals, in between meals. Best is patient has taken half meal, take enzymes, then half of the meal. And if it's a larger meal, we can go up to 40,000 also, depending on the portion of the meal. So my advice is tell them 4 to 5 smaller meals a day, and with each meal they take 20,000 enzymes. So this will definitely help their steatoria. If it doesn't, then we may add either H2 blockers or sometimes proton pump inhibitors. But most patients do not require it because nowadays the enzymes which are available are microspheres and enteric coated. So acid doesn't have an effect on it. So you don't need to give acid suppressive therapy in them because I find every patient is on PPIs. That is not required. Please don't do that. De-addiction, again, I would emphasize, is an important component of management. So with this, and also nowadays there is no emphasis on bone health. So nowadays, please check their calcium and vitamin D, and if possible, get a DEXA scan in elderly people at least. So what is the prognosis overall? If they have good pain relief, what happens to longevity? I showed you Dr. Jeevarji's data that they die very early in the prime of their life. But now we and others have shown that there is a high probability of 80% probability that these patients will live at least for 35 years or till the age of 60, 65 years after the diagnosis. So prognosis actually is very good. Now, the problem that we are seeing now is diabetes, if untreated or not treated well, and alcoholism are the major causes of death in these patients. It is not pancreatitis per se. It is alcohol and diabetes. So be careful about that. But about 1 to 2% may also develop pancreatic cancer. That's a different story. So I'm not discussing pancreatic cancer today. And there is no guideline as of today that we have to actually screen those patients. So that's why I omitted that part. So now I'll summarize my talk, particularly about management. There is a concept of progressive injury leading to chronic pancreatitis, and I've shown you that progressive model, acute to recurrent, acute to chronic pancreatitis. And it is years before a patient will develop a dilated duct and stones. So they have chronic pancreatitis in the early part also, but it is just that we are not able to diagnose it. And at that stage, they don't require endoscopic therapy or surgery. It is the medical therapy. Antioxidants, enzymes, analgesics, adequate diet is what is required. With this therapy, about 50% patient will have significant pain relief. With step-up therapy, that means medical to endoscopic to surgery, in those with dilated duct stones, about 80% of patients will have significant pain relief. And we need to develop more effective therapy for which obviously we need more research and understanding of the pathophysiology of the disease. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll be happy to take questions.
Sir, there is one question. Which NSAIDs opioids are recommended for paying for chronic pancreatitis? Please differentiate how to use in IPD and OPD. So which are the agents to be used in these patients?
Okay. So if you have a patient in the outpatient department who comes with off and on recurrent pain, first suggestion is that you can give them tramadol. Tramadol is a fairly effective drug. In some of these patients, sometimes we try NSAIDs also. Even, in fact, paracetamol 650 milligram can also work. Sometimes you can try oral naproxen, 500 milligram. This also works in some patients. But most commonly, they require opioid. Tramadol, I think, is the best. When it comes to patient who is admitted in the hospital with acute pain, you can give injectable paracetamol. You can try injectable diclofenac, but do monitor their renal functions. And otherwise, again, best would be opioids. In opioids, tramadol will be a good choice. You can go up to 100 milligram twice a day. Sometimes you can give others like fentanyl, but I think tramadol, a combination of tramadol and diclofenac should be enough in most patients, I would say.
Thank you, sir. So another question is, does ESWL help in parenchymal stones without main pancreatic duct stones? MRCP is not showing any MPD obstruction.
Right. So very good question. So ESWL doesn't help. It is done only for stones in the main pancreatic duct, not in smaller ducts. That we cannot take out, because that depends on the pathophysiology of the disease, which are not able to target so far. And that is why I said that we need more effective therapy.
Okay. Hardik, can I ask a question?
Yes, sir, please.
Dr. Garg, it was excellent presentation. I have two questions actually. The first one is that there was a popularity of celiac ganglion block for a pain relief in chronic pancreatitis. Sir, your take on that?
So in general, it is not effective. Sometimes we do it. And the reason for that is a patient has significant pain, chronic pain. It's not recurrent pain, chronic pain going on for months. And he is not in a good shape for surgical therapy. He has failed medical therapy. We have tried endoscopic therapy. He's not improving, right? He's admitted in the hospital. He's not in a good condition for a major surgical procedure. We tried celiac block. Most commonly nowadays, EUS guided, but a radiologist can do a good job by CT guided celiac plexus block. And then they may have temporary relief for about a month or 2 months. Once they get better, their nutrition improves, give them diet, then they can go for surgery.
Okay, thank you. Sir, the second part is that we are operating so many cases in, I was saying because we operate so many cases of pancreatitis, in the last 4 or 5 years, we have come across 4 or 5 cases of patient developing adenocarcinoma with a long history of chronic pancreatitis. So is it becoming more commoner?
So that's an important observation. So I would say probably it is not becoming more common. It is being picked up more commonly. So there are a couple of reasons for that. One, these patients are living longer now. So I showed you they develop disease in 20s, but they live till 60s. So after about 15, 20 years, we did a study of chronic pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer. We found the mean interval from diagnosis to pancreatic cancer about 17 years. So once they live longer, once they are in their 40s and 50s, because of chronic inflammation, they may develop cancer. Second is now better imaging is available. You have state-of-the-art CT scan, MRIs, diffusion MRI, EUS. That these tests will pick up more cancers. And also, as you said, you are operating more and more patients. So you will then find, oh, there is cancer here. It's not just chronic pancreatitis inflammatory mass. But majority of these patients have idiopathic chronic pancreatitis. Genetic mutations is there. That's why they develop it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. Hardik, please.
Sir, there is another question. When surgery is needed in chronic pancreatitis?
So surgery is needed for multiple indications. One is, which I showed, there is no response to medical therapy. And I showed you a good example of medical therapy. they have a dilated duct with stone or stricture, they don't respond to endoscopic therapy, or endoscopic therapy is not possible because they may have large stones, multiple strictures. Second, when they have complications like an inflammatory head mass, this will not respond to any endoscopic therapy. They have associated biliary obstruction. They have development of pancreatic cancer. Then they require surgical therapy. So no response to medical therapy, endoscopic therapy, inflammatory head mass, biliary obstruction, cancer.
Yes, sir. We are seeing more and more patients in whom we need a phrase procedure. Previously, we used to do only isolated longitudinal pancreaticogenesis, but now the inflammatory head mass presentation is becoming commoner, where the surgery is the answer.
Because this is more in alcoholic pancreatitis. How commonly you see alcoholic pancreatitis in Gujarat?
Lot of, sir. Lot of. Though there is a ban, we see lot of.
No, but you are saying that on a platform. I mean, everybody is listening. There is a complete ban in Gujarat.
It's okay. We will not go in detail of that, sir.
Okay.
But we do see lot of alcoholic patients definitely having a chronic pancreatitis.
And they have more commonly inflammatory head mass.
Yes. So we usually need a phrase procedure in them most of the time.
I agree with that.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Any role of CE and CA19-9 to monitor on regular basis?
So short answer is no. Because many times in acute exacerbation and chronic inflammation, CA19-9 is increased. So in fact, there are no clear-cut guidelines on whether to really screen these patients for cancer later on, after 10, 15 years. Only in hereditary pancreatitis, they say that you can do some kind of surveillance, either with an MRI or an EUS, but both tests have their own problems. So as of today, there is no consensus on that. But clinically, let me give you a pointer. If a patient comes to you with a new onset of pain, so patient has been doing well for 4, 5 years, 8 years, has diabetes. He comes and says, oh, I've got pain for 3 months, continuous pain. Rule out cancer. Patient is doing well, comes to you with jaundice. Rule out cancer. So change in character of pain, onset of new pain, development of jaundice, these are important clinical pointers towards diagnosis of cancer.
So usually we subject patient for ERCP and then we call them at least every 3 to 6 months for a follow-up ERCP. We remove the stent, do pancreaticogram. So any suggestions when to remove the stent, or always we should keep on changing it?
So I think if somebody is changing regularly, it should not be done. So first of all, if you have a stone in the main pancreatic duct, you try and remove the stone. If it's a small stone, 5, 6, 7 millimeters, you can remove it after sphincterotomy. If it's a large stone, it will require ESWL. So you may do 1, 2, 3, 4 sittings of ESWL and take out the stone. Once you have taken out the stone, you put a stent only for a period of 3 to 6 months, not longer. Long stent will cause its own problem. If a patient has significant stricture, then you can put a stent for 6 months to 12 months. And you can put 1 10 French stent, sometimes 2 10 French stents, but maximum duration recommended is 6 to 12 months, not longer. Don't keep calling them and do ERCP again and again. It causes more problems. You see, the reason I showed you the story of how the disease develops, that the disease starts from acinar cell, from parenchyma, and not the duct, is this. We only look at the duct, which is not the cause of the problem, which is not the cause. It only adds to the problem in some patients. So the duct-centric intervention, duct-centric thinking has to change.
But so what after 12 months? Suppose if patient comes after 12 months. And
so that's fine. You have to keep the patient on medical therapy. If you find the patient has significant pain, you find stricture has come back, you find stones are still there, offer them surgery.
Okay.
Sir, any further questions, sir, you would like to ask Dr. P.R. Modi, sir?
No, sorry. It's a more of a surgical. I don't know whether should I ask that, sir. What is your take on it? Because we are thinking of that total pancreatectomy with transplantation.
I won't suggest that.
Yes, that's
to
what
my mind,
people are going on that direction, particularly surgeons. But I don't think it is still there.
No, it's not. It's a nihilistic approach to a disease. So
yes.
a young patient will come, and there are only a few centers in US which are doing it. Young patient comes with chronic recurrent pain. Is it 18, 20, 25 years, and they'll go remove the pancreas and put islet cells. I don't think it is required.
Yes,
I'm not a fan of that. And I've shown you very clear data that with adequate therapy, 80% patients have pain relief. And I've shown you over a period of time, 10 years or so, the disease burns out. The pain is gone. So I don't think that's a good strategy. I'm not in favor of that.
Yes, sir. Absolutely agree, sir.
Right. So there is one last question by Dr. Kirit Akhani. He's a senior physician of Ahmedabad. If antioxidants started early after an episode of acute pancreatitis, this can make any difference in progression to chronic pancreatitis?
Short answer again is no. We don't know. So not after acute pancreatitis, but somebody who comes with recurrent acute pancreatitis, this patient is likely to develop stress.
Not audible.
I think we have lost connection.
Yeah.
Okay, Yogesh, can I leave now?
I have
Wednesday emergency. My resident is calling me since 15 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. It was a nice session. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was great.
So I think Dr. Pramod Garg has lost connection, but it was a very nice lecture. Sir is back.
He's back.
Yes.
Sir, so can we address one or two questions more, sir?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, there is one question by Dr. Smith Kumar. Overdiagnosis of chronic pancreatitis by EUS, how it can be avoided? Any tips?
So I think clinical feature is very important. So anybody who comes with at least 2 episodes of acute pancreatitis, and at least one of them is documented. Documented means that during an episode of pancreatitis, there is increased amylase lipase and some imaging evidence. Now, if such a patient comes with 2 or more episodes, you may consider that there is a possibility of early chronic pancreatitis. So that is one. Second is, don't do EUS immediately after an attack of acute pancreatitis. Do it at least 2 to 3 months later, because sometimes resolving changes may be picked up erroneously as chronic pancreatitis changes. So don't do that. But let me tell you, we often do EUS after even 1 episode of acute pancreatitis if the etiology is not known. So sometimes we do that for different reasons. We want to see a gallbladder stone. We want to see if there is a ductal obstruction. We want to see if there is any other abnormality, but not to make chronic pancreatitis diagnosis.
Sir, there is another question by Dr. Tarun Bhardwaj. Does nasojejunal placement helps in pain management in acute flare of chronic pancreatitis?
So only in a percentage of small percentage of patients. These are the patients who have often a chronic abdominal pain. They have inflammatory head mass. They often have partial gastric outlet obstruction, and their pain going on for weeks or months. And mind you, most of these patients are alcoholic patients. In those patients, we put a nasojejunal tube and feed them enterally because they are in the hospital, they require long-term treatment. So in those patients with partial outlet obstruction, inflammatory head mass, intolerance to oral feeding, chronic pain, we do that.
Sir, there is one question from Amitabh Mohan Jairar. What is the time from onset of chronic pancreatitis that we should start screening for adenocarcinoma?
So I told you, there are no guidelines on that. But anybody who has had illness for more than 10 to 15 years, be careful. If they come to you with new onset of pain, change in character of pain, any other complication like biliary obstruction, I think you should then screen with either a EUS or a diffusion MRI or sometimes even a CT scan.
Sir, any role of metallic stents in chronic pancreatitis?
So some patients with biliary obstruction have been shown to benefit from metallic stents in the bile duct, but not metallic stents in the pancreatic duct. No. But majority of patients who have pain and have biliary obstruction, surgery is a better alternative than medical therapy, than endoscopic therapy.
Another question is, sir, should we screen every patient for SPINK and CFTR mutation? Does it change the management?
No, it doesn't. So we don't generally advise that every patient should be tested, because right now we don't have any therapy available. But for research purposes, yes. There is a possibility, however, that some CFTR modulators might be available soon. And in that case, we might be, doing it more commonly. So we do for a research purpose, but not otherwise.
Another question, I think you have already answered. What antioxidants you prescribe that you have clearly shown?
I have shown you there is a cocktail of antioxidants. There are a couple of brands available. They can be used.
Sir, another question is pancreatic duct stenting the answer to recurrent acute pancreatitis? Apurva is asking.
So no. So unless the pancreatic duct is dilated, there is no role for ERCP or pancreatic duct stenting. And if the duct is dilated, you don't diagnose as recurrent acute pancreatitis, you diagnose as chronic pancreatitis.
So one last question we would like to ask you by Dr. S.K. Mishra, definitive treatment for groove pancreatitis.
So groove pancreatitis is a special entity. Let me just briefly tell about that. It is seen most commonly in alcoholics. It's a disease where the bulk of the inflammation is involving the groove between duodenum and pancreatic head. And also it involves the duodenum and partly head of the pancreas. So what they present with, these patients present with is gastric outlet obstruction. They have pain, they have recurrent vomitings, intolerance to oral feeding. If you do endoscopy, you find there is narrowing in the D1 and D2. The mucosa is edematous and erythematous. And on CT scan, you find small fluid collections between the duodenal wall and the pancreatic head, and sometimes the duodenal wall also. The best treatment is medical therapy in these patients. And in these patients also, we place a nasojejunal tube for enteral feeding. We give them medical therapy. And fortunately, most of these patients, they stop alcohol and smoking, they improve. Only some of these patients, if they don't improve, they require surgery. And in that case, it is usually resection surgery rather than LPJ.
I think we can stop here. It was a nice session, sir. And many of the queries of our routine clinics have been solved. And we are really lucky to have you as a speaker. Thank you very much, sir.
Once again, sir, I thank you. And from the entire Association of Physicians of Ahmedabad and my team, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and giving your important time. Thank you so much.
For your invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Good day.
Good day, sir.